And they traded McMahon to the Yankees, and I watched a couple of games. He's done really great.
Good.
His first game, he made an incredible catch, which he often does on third base. You know, he's a really good defender. But he fired across the mound and got this guy out. And then
It was on the top 10.
yeah. And he either got a hit or a walk and scored in the very first outing. So the Yankees are glad they got him, and he's probably glad to be playing for a close to winning team, although the Yankees themselves have gone a little south recently. But they're at least in contention.
So the Rockies are the farm club for the Yankees.
Exactly.
We're
going to send him down to Denver. Is that the way that
That's
is?
right.
I call the Rockies the best AAA team in baseball.
Exactly.
Okay, so now you're ready, sir?
Okay, I think our guests were going to join us, but we won't wait for they'll make their way down here eventually.
They're at the table that you have, which means, you know.
Oh, forget it. Okay. It's over now. Well, we'll start. I passed out a little homework last time, but this is not a test. I just wondered if anybody had any reactions to that, any either comments or questions or disagreements, or whatever.
I thought it was a good summary of what we've done so far
Yeah.
and a good perspective of what the Revelations is about. She did an excellent job.
She really did. She's a young woman priest, an associate in Nashville, I think, in a parish. I didn't look her up, so I don't know if she has some graduate work or what. But anyway, I thought she did a good job. It was accessible, and yet I thought the coverage was pretty good. All right. Well, we're going to plunge ahead then. When last we met, we looked at the sevens, looked at the series of sevens that repeat over and over again. There are actually more than 7 series of 7 in Revelation, but there are kind of 7 major series. And I think I said last time, I don't think of those as adding up end to end, like this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then that's going to happen, but rather a different way of telling the story over and over again. And the story is the same. You're under persecution. It's going to last for a while, but you're going to be okay because Christ has won the battle, and ultimately you'll come through. So persevere. So hang in there. And it's told in, of course, all these sevens, the woes and the trumpets and all the rest are told in this apocalyptic language, which is intended to be very evocative and emotional and to carry a lot of freight. When we get in trouble with Revelation is when we take this kind of symbolic language, which is always intended to be symbolic, and try to turn it into literal days or weeks or years or months, or this is how you add all this up and then this is going to happen. And that's not what John was trying to convey. He was trying to convey a sense of this vision, which is, we know things are tough. We're afraid they're going to get tougher because the Roman Empire is still in charge, and as the church spreads and grows and becomes more of a force, the hand of the oppressor is going to come down even harder. But please hang in there because the Lord reigns. So that's what the series of sevens are about. I'm going to continue more of this kind of symbolism and language in verse 12. Chapter 12. The sevens take us up through chapter 11, so we're about halfway through the book when we get to verse 11, or chapter 11. And now we're in verse 12. And in this book we meet the woman, the dragon, and eventually the beast. Chapter 12. A great portent appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was with child, and she cried out in her pangs of birth in anguish for delivery. And another portent appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 diadems upon his heads. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to bear a child, that he might devour her child when she brought it forth. She brought forth a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness where she had a place prepared by God in which to be nourished for 1,260 days, to be exact. Let's have a slide. There she is. That's the woman as described pretty accurately. It's hard to see some of this, but she has 12, she's clothed with the sun behind her. It sort of wraps around her, so she's clothed with the sun. She's standing on the moon, and around her head is a kind of a halo with, if you could count them all the way in a circle, it would be 12 stars. The sun, the moon, and the stars, I guess you would say. And this is, like all symbols in this book and often in literature, kind of a multi-layered symbol. It obviously in this depiction, and even I think in the description in the book, it's Mary, right? It's the figure of the Virgin Mary. Talks about her being pregnant, her bringing forth a male child. The dragon is going to devour the child, or try to, but the child was taken up to God. Well, yes, pretty clearly that's the story of Mary giving birth to the Messiah and the resurrection, overcoming whatever the powers of evil threw at him. It's multi-layered because this symbol also represents Israel, which is often represented by a woman. The 12 stars here could be seen as the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is the woman out of which the Messiah came, Mary, the people out of which the Messiah came, the people of Israel, of which Mary is sometimes seen as a symbol. And Mary is also seen as a symbol for the church. From ancient days, Mary has been seen as a symbol for the church, the one who is to bear Christ. She bore Christ into the world, carried Christ into the world, and we as the followers of Jesus are to be the bearers of Christ as well. In the Gospel of John, you remember Jesus commends the Apostle John to Mary. He says, "This is your mother, behold your son," the sense that Mary and the church are somehow to be seen together. So this great series of verses, the woman represents all at once Israel, Mary, and the church. The child is the Messiah, Jesus. The woman is the people and the person out of which the Messiah came. And then, after he was taken up to God, the church's persecutions begin. In verse 6, the woman fled into the wilderness, this now being the church. We don't have any record of Mary fleeing into the wilderness, but the church clearly was under persecution and in a kind of exile, where she, the church, has a place prepared by God in which to be nourished. So the church is going to be cared for even in the middle of the difficult times that they are facing. And this whole period of persecution is a period that's really symbolized in this cosmic battle between the forces of evil and the forces of good. The cosmic battle between Satan and God. Verses 7 through 17 talks about this in, again, symbolic and cosmic imagery. A war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought, but they were defeated. And there was no longer any place for them in heaven, and the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the salvation and power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, who accuses them night and day before God." You remember in the book of Job, the figure of Satan is Lucifer, or Satan is seen as an angel before the fall, if you will, a cosmic power. These angels are very mysterious in the Bible. Like I said, the Orthodox call them the energies of God. Not sure exactly what angels are, just another level of being. And some of them, or at least one of them's job was to be the accuser, to accuse people before God. So the devil went before the throne and said, "You know, Your servant Job, yeah, have you ever seen him? Oh, yes, Job is wonderful. Well, yeah, because you're protecting him all the time. You throw a few plagues and difficulties at him and watch him, he'll curse you to your face. And so the story goes that Job then goes through all these difficulties, yet remains faithful, sort of like the church, through the times of difficulty. But the idea of Satan being the accuser is something that goes way back in biblical history. Now the salvation, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives even unto death. So they've conquered the church. You and I have basically, because of the victory of Christ, conquered the difficulties by the blood of the Lamb, by the life of the Savior offered on the cross, and by the word of their testimony. In other words, now it's our job and the church's job to bear witness, to tell the story, to be the bearers of Christ into the world today. And these early Christians did it even unto death. Many of them were martyred in some places of the world, places are still under the threat of martyrdom. Rejoice then, O heaven, and you who dwell therein. Verse 13, when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had borne the child. So here's Satan pursuing the church, the woman who had borne the child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness to a place where she is to be nourished for a time and a half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river which the dragon had poured out. Then the dragon was angry with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring. We're making war against the Christians, the followers of the offspring of this woman. On those who keep the commandments of God and bear testimony to Jesus. So that's clearly talking about Christians. And so John is, again, he's not predicting the future so much as he is saying this is what's going on right now and is indeed going to continue. So hang in there. He knows people who are suffering this kind of persecution. And as we'll see as we move through this section, the oppressors are is the Roman Empire, but behind that, for John, is Satan, the powers of evil that are using Rome to be the ones who crucified Jesus and the ones who are continuing to follow and to crucify the church. Stop here for questions, comments? You want to plunge ahead, right? All right. Next, we're going to meet the 2 beasts. Beast from the sea and a beast from the land. The beast from the sea represents the Roman Empire. See if you can see it in this. Chapter 13. I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 diadems upon its horns and a blasphemous name upon its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, and its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power. So the dragon, Satan, gives his power to the beast, to the empire. To it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. Out of its head seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth followed the beast with wonder. The Roman Empire had spread all across the known world. Men worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" Well, emperor worship was the order of the day. Caesar required that of the followers. And so for John, Satan has given this role to the Roman Empire to draw the worship of the faithful away from God and away from the Messiah to the empire. And it was happening all around them. And the reason some Christians were being martyred was because they refused to do that. They refused to offer the pinch of incense to the emperor that was required. The Jews had an agreement at one point with the Romans that they didn't have to do that as long as they would pray for the emperor, as long as they would pray for the well-being of the state. The Christians had not quite got in under that loophole at this point. Yeah.
So the mortal wound seems a very specific image.
Yeah. Anybody have any idea what that might be? The mortal wound? Anybody want to guess? We don't know. You know, it may well be that it talks about times, so the ups and downs of the empire, that it appeared that it wasn't going to make it, but then it did. Came out on the other side of conflicts that even Rome had with its adversaries over the years. But I don't have the key to that particular code. And again, we don't have always a one-on-one correspondence. You're right, though. It sounds quite mortal, quite literal, specific. John probably knew exactly what he meant by that.
I think the other thing is that, you know, if we situate this at the end of the first century,
Right?
the empire hung on for, you know, three more centuries. And so whatever wound that John may have been referring to may have been may have been a scratch in terms of the next 4 centuries.
Exactly.
And, you know,
So the mortal wound was there, but it was healed. You know,
Yeah,
it got better. Yeah, I think that's right. So we have all the symbolism of, we always wonder, well, a leopard, what is this all about? The lion's mouth. And it goes back to, once again, to the prophets and to the great apocalyptic prophet Daniel, which we never hear about very much in church. We read about Daniel in the lion's den, and when that is over, we leave the book of Daniel. Even in our lectionary and morning and evening prayer that many of us read every day, we don't read the second half because it's weird, just like Revelation is weird. Daniel has visions as well. So just to give you an idea of the kind of world that John would have been seeped in, he would have known these symbols in his breast, in his heart, in his mind, as would any faithful Jew of the time. These would not be estranged, these images, because he would have known, or have at least heard in synagogue and temple read this 7th chapter of Daniel. In the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and a vision of his head as he lay in bed. He wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. See, visions and dreams are very similar. Sometimes they're waking dreams, sometimes sleeping dreams. Daniel said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, his wings were plucked off and lifted up from the ground and made to stand on its 2 feet like a man. The mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. After this I looked, and lo, another like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrible and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had iron teeth, and devoured and broke in pieces and stamped the residue with its feet. It was different from all the other beasts before it. It had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little horn, before which 3 of its horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in its horn were eyes like the eyes of a man. Well, if you can visualize that, it's quite beyond me. Yeah, we could do this today, right? Absolutely. So this passage from Daniel, scholars believe that the lion in this particular scenario represents the Babylonian Empire, which Daniel is looking back on. The ones that had conquered the Jews. The leopard represents the next wave of conquerors, the Persians. The dragon represents the Greeks, which came along right after that. And the 10 horns represent 10 rulers of the Greeks. And the little horn, they believe, represents Antiochus Epiphanes, who gained his throne by overthrowing the others, by uprooting the others. He was seen as a kind of treacherous guy. So Daniel, again, had all these in mind, and probably his audience would have known some of that code language. And now John, all those centuries later, is drawing on some of that code language, knowing that his audience would also have been familiar with it. They might not have known all the absolute specifics, but they would have known that these beasts represented empire and a succession of empires. And so it would not have been a stretch for them to say that this is now talking about Rome. I'm talking about the very enemies that we are facing right now in front of us. That takes us down to I've jumped to Daniel here. We're going to get now to 666. You know, these mysterious numbers that we've all seen represent various and sundry things. There's been millions of volumes written about what 666 might be about, but let's see what the context it is. Chapter 13, verse 11. Then I saw another beast which rose out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. It exercised all authority of the first beast in its presence and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast. Remember, that's Rome, whose mortal wound was healed. It works great signs. Skipped over this. Remember, now this is a beast from the earth. The beast from the sea represented the Roman Empire in John's vision. The beast from the earth represents the emperor, the leader of that empire, so it's more of an individual person. It works great signs, making fire come down from heaven in the sight of men, and by the signs with which it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on the earth, bidding them make an image for the beast, which was wounded by the sword, yet lived. So the emperor has the symbols of Rome that people are supposed to worship. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast should even speak, and to cause those who would not worship the image to be slain. Martyrs again. If you won't worship the emperor, you're going to be taken out. Also, it causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast, the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let him who has understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666. So they're marked with this sign. And we believe that what that represents is an economic boycott of Christians during that time. You couldn't do business with Christians because they were trying to marginalize them in the culture. And so symbolically, I don't think they went around marking all non-Christians, but symbolically, if you could do business if you had the mark of the beast upon you, if you were a follower of the Roman Empire rather than a follower of Christ. So 666, I have to share the story. The first time I came to Colorado, I had to change license plates from Iowa to Colorado, and I went to pick up my license plate, and the last 3 numbers were 666. And I took it home and I thought about it, and I went back. And I said, this is a little embarrassing. I said, I don't really buy a lot of this literalism, but I said, I have to say I'm a priest, and driving around with a car with 666 in the back just is not it's not what I want to pursue. And so they actually exchanged the license plate, turned it in. You could have probably just taken it just for the fun of it, right? All right. So we think that 666 represents Nero Caesar, one of the earlier Caesars. Put up the next slide. There it is. Each number in Greek and Hebrew has some kind of numerical equivalent. I'm not sure if it was like A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3 in our alphabet, or it was some more complex thing. It might have been different in Hebrew and Greek, but each of them had a numerical equivalent. So if you were to take the word, the name Nero Caesar, and lay it out like that, the first would be Nun, Resh, Law, all the way down. Each of those had a numerical number, and so if you add all those up, it comes to exactly 666. So scholars believe that, again, this is symbolic. John did not want to say, look out for the Caesars. And by the way, he's not around anymore, the particular Caesar, but we'll get to that. Symbolically, he wasn't going to name the name Rome, so he will use the code word Babylon, or he will talk about a beast. And he wasn't going to use the term Caesar because whoever was in charge and sitting on the throne of Caesar was going to take that pretty personally. So he uses this kind of code word, or indeed his vision itself, used that kind of code word for him. Nero Caesar actually lived before the book of Revelation was written. He lived from 37 to 68 BCE, or CE. I still have to get that straight. What we used to call AD is now the Common Era. Nero has a bad reputation. He is the one who blamed the Great Fire of Rome, which took place in 64, on the Christians. He said, yeah, you want to know how this happened? Those Christians, you know, they're weird. So that caused a whole another wave of persecution, including the ones that he led. Many Christians were tortured and killed as punishment for the fact that they burned down the city of Rome, which they never were involved in, of course. He may have ordered the execution of Peter and Paul. We're not certain of that, but it's conceivable that he was the one who ordered that execution. At any rate, this Nero Caesar was fabled and infamous as the kind of emperor that is going to be tough on Christians down through the centuries, the kind of empire leader, whether you're a king or a president or whatever you are, you're going to have to beware of this particular Caesar type. So he became a type of Caesar whom Christians saw as major oppressors and suppressors of the faith. So beware, it says, of the beast, for it is a human number, and its number is 666. It's interesting, there's a little hint here. It says, this calls for wisdom. In other words, it's not going to be self-evident to you what the 66 means. Let him who has understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. So he's hinting there that this represents some kind of a person. And then it just took scholars a while to figure out this numerical ranking. Yeah.
So I'm not doubting the scholarly, I just find it very uncomfortable to deal with formulas and words because of how things get concocted. But I also heard another explanation that 666 falls short of the sevens in each capacity.
Sorry, say again?
That 6 falls short of 7.
Good. So falls short of the perfect number 7, the number that represents completion and fullness, but this is a little less than that.
It's human because it does not reach perfection. Now, symbols can mean multiple things.
Of course, and do, and intentionally do sometimes. It's not always intended to be a one-on-one correlation. Right, good. So we're going to press along here. I'm going to skip over a section here because we just can't go chapter by chapter. The following chapters really have to do with the fall of Babylon and great battles that take place. And pretty clearly, Babylon is the code word for Rome. Babylon is no longer a power that they were worried about in that current time. Rome certainly was. And Babylon has come down through the ages sometimes to symbolize Rome or an oppressing power. So we're going to go all the way over to chapter 20, last couple of chapters, and then we have all this language, much of it symbolic and hard to figure out about the various battles that are going to take place over the struggle between the forces of good and forces of evil and the fall of Babylon. And then in chapter 20, we begin looking once again to this heavenly vision that is overarching all the stuff that's going on in the world. Chapter 20. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand a key of the bottomless pit and a great chain. And he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and threw him into the pit, and shut it and sealed it over him, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be loosed for a little while. Then I saw thrones, and seated on them were those to whom judgment was committed, and I saw souls of those who had been beheaded for their testimony to Jesus and for the word of God, and who had not worshipped the beast or its image, and had not received its mark on their foreheads or their hands. They came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he who shares in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and they shall reign with him 1,000 years. This passage, cobbled together with 2 or 3 others in the entire Bible or entire New Testament, is what gives rise to the idea of a rapture, that Christ is going to come and take out of the world the good guys, Christians, faithful people, and then there would be 1,000 years of difficulty on earth, and then Christ would come, I guess you would call it a third time, and then everything would happen. The resurrection would take place in the end of time. It is a very kind of marginal understanding of the interpretation of this passage. This 1,000 years is in heaven, not on earth. These are the martyrs that are standing before the throne of God, those who had lost their lives for the faith and been beheaded for Jesus, all the rest. They are reigning with God in heaven while waiting for the second coming of Christ. There's not a 3-step process. There's basically a 2-step process in the entire New Testament. This rapture business is something that we can talk about a little bit next time when we talk about the history of how this book has been interpreted down through the centuries. It's really popular in the United States and evangelical circles and Pentecostal circles particularly, and around the world where we have exported missionaries with that theology. The Roman Catholics know nothing about this. The Greek Orthodox know nothing about this. The Anglicans know nothing about it. There was an occasional Anglican who had evangelical tendencies, but basically the Anglican Church has never taught this theory of the rapture. So I just have to say, if you hear about it and it seems like something that is so powerful or so prevalent, it really is prevalent among a very small percentage of Christians. And they really take 3 or 4 passages out of context, put them together and say that this is what's going to happen. It's pretty clear from the sweep of this book, as we'll see in a minute, and the sweep of I would say the whole Bible, but particularly the New Testament, that we have a period of history. We have Christ dying and being raised. We enter in a new period of history. There's an interim period of time. Christ comes at the end to reconcile all things to himself. We'll take a look at that in a bit. So not a 3-step process. This chapter 20, verse 1 through 8 that I just read is the reign of the martyrs who are on the throne. You remember we had that earlier in the book, that they were seated on thrones, the 24 elders, and that they fall down before God in worship and in praise. That's the vision of heaven with these who have gone before. Verse 11 through 15. Then I saw a great white throne and him who sat upon it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books and by what they had done. And the sea gave up its dead, death and Hades gave up the dead in them, and all were judged by what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So this is the final judgment. This is the second coming, the parousia, the final day, great day of the Lord, which we actually sang about in our last verse of our hymn today. You know, we read over these things and sing over these things in our liturgy and in our prayers, and we sometimes, in our hymns often, and we don't pay attention. Last verse we sang together. Christians, this Lord Jesus shall return again with his Father's glory o'er the earth to reign. For all wreaths of empire met upon his brow, and our hearts confess him King of glory now. This is the final culmination. And we read about it in verse 21, and then I'm going to stop and finish reading Bible to you, and we can talk. This is the final judgment. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling of God is with humankind. He will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither sighing or crying or pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. Let's put up the last slide. This is my brilliant artwork. I'm so talented. But this is a kind of vision that this book particularly, but again, I would say this thrust of the New Testament holds forth. That there is the creation in which we live now. It is called, in this scenario, the old creation, which is passing away. You can see it's coming down to a point on the right-hand side. The new creation is being born even as we speak, and it is opening up to the future. We are living in that diamond-shaped area in the middle, the kind of intermediate time, if you will. The first X in this book, and I would say in much of the New Testament, in Paul, represents that Christ, X is the Greek word for the first letter of Christ's name, Christ's death and resurrection particularly, but the whole Christ event is when, for Christians, the new world begins. It's when the new creation begins. We are baptized into fellowship with Christ, and we enter into a whole new developing creation. And we are living in that diamond-shaped area now where there's an overlap between the new and the old. We know how we're supposed to live, the sort of new creation life, but we don't. We're struggling. We know that the victory has been won, and yet persecution still continues in some parts of the world for Christians, and to all of us, in some sense, we struggle against the powers, and so we are not yet into the fullness of the new creation. But the new creation will indeed dawn, and we call that the parousia, or the second coming of Christ, the return of Christ. There are a variety of ways to talk about it. We talk about it in the Creed every Sunday. He will come again to judge the living and the dead. We clearly believe something is going to happen in the future. And at that point, we enter the fullness of a new creation. The kind of theology that most of us grew up with, I think, and many of us still kind of live with, is that you live and you die and you go to heaven. You go to a place of eternal bliss, and you're kind of a disembodied spirit. In fact, I would say many Christians believe in an immortal soul which never dies, and when your body goes down, your immortal soul flits off to some place in the sky. That's really Greek philosophy. That's really Platonism. It's not what the Christian faith teaches. There are two stages. There's a death and a resurrection. Just as Jesus died fully and was then raised, so we believe we will die and then been raised. It's a two-step process. And probably even hinted here in the book of Revelation, a kind of intermediate state, the place where those martyrs were living in heaven while the battle was still being waged on earth. The martyrs were there praising God, the saints and angels, the 24 elders and the four living creatures all praising God in this state, which we call paradise, as Anglicans usually. Roman Catholics sometimes call it purgatory. Protestants call it heaven. But it's not the final dwelling place. It's a temporary place. It's a place where we go to continue our spiritual growth, if you will, on the other side of the grave. The final culmination then, when the judgment will actually take place, when the separation of the sheep from the goats takes place, that's the second coming. That's the judgment day upon which we have not yet arrived. Represents the second X there. Now, there's lots of theories about the afterlife, and we have to be honest to say none of us know for absolutely sure what's going to happen. What I'm trying to convey is what this book particularly says, and what I believe the New Testament says. Just as we say Christ was the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep, what happened to Jesus? He died. There was an intermediate state for him, in his case, 3 days, and then he was raised. And he was raised with a kind of body, was he not? They could see him, they could touch him, they could put their hands in his wounds if they chose to, and yet he could appear in a room with locked doors. He was not immediately recognized by the two people on the road to Emmaus. There was a transformation that took place. Paul calls it a spiritual body, which we will one day have. It's a little confusing. How can you be both a spirit and a body? The Greek is a little iffy. But what we believe will happen, I believe what will happen, I think what this book teaches will happen, is that we die, we enter into an intermediate state, which we wait for the final judgment. When the final judgment takes place, an entire new creation will come out of the old, and we will live there as embodied people, but a different kind of body. How else can we recognize one another? You know, they talk about when you die, you'll know well, if you're a disembodied spirit without any kind of physicality or any kind of presence, I don't know how that happens. So, 3 steps: life, death, resurrection. And we wait for that final day before it's all sorted out. So I think there's hope, there's hope in that for everybody. I don't make any judgments about who goes to heaven or hell because I don't think that decision has been made yet. Except, certain decisions you make, you live in the consequences of it, so you can live in heaven on earth or hell on earth. But for the final destination, whatever that will be, that's yet to be determined. That's what happens at the end. The early Christians thought it was going to happen right away. John certainly thought it was going to happen very, very soon. Our problem is we're still waiting. And so many people have said, well, this must not be the case. Jesus must have been wrong. Albert Schweitzer said that, as a matter of fact. He thought Jesus was wrong in that decision. I do not. It's simply a longer time than we had thought. At one point in the New Testament, it is suggested that it's because of God's patience with us that it's taking so long. We haven't done our job yet. The gospel has not yet been preached to every creature, or at least not accepted by every creature. He's giving us time. I don't know if that's true or not. It's also said in the Psalms that, one day is like 1,000 in God's sight, and 1,000 days is like a day. For God, it may not seem like this has been long at all. So it's just been 2,000 years, for heaven's sake. Even this world has been around for many, many, many millennia, and the universe before that. So for God, this period of waiting may not seem very long. For us, we're impatient. We wish it would happen. Now, some people don't. Some people dread the judgment day and are afraid of it. I think we're going to meet there a God of grace and a God of glory. We're going to meet there a forgiving Savior. And as we trust in that love and grace, we're going to be fine. I hope everyone will. I believe we have to postulate the existence of a hell, of some kind of separation from God, because God gave us free will and we have to be able to choose. Some people may, even in the final analysis, choose against God and against Christ. I hope that doesn't happen. I can't remember who it was that wrote, because we believe in free will, we must postulate the existence of a hell, but we don't have to believe anybody will be in it. Perhaps love will win in the end. And that's certainly my prayer and my hope, that no one be lost. But we have to give people the freedom to finally say no. Okay, I'm done. Let's see what else we have to say. Gary, please.
I was just going to say, what are you going to talk about next time? And then I'll talk about what I'm going to talk about next time.
Go ahead.
Do you know what you're going to talk about next time?
Next time?
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about the the way the Bible, the book of Revelation has been understood historically, like how the early church took it, how Middle Ages took it, how some of the more, I don't know if I'll get into Hal Lindsey and all that, but you may want to take that part of it, but
Talk about, I'm gonna kind of situate how and why it has fascination for folks today. And, you know, so I talk about it that way rather than from the scholarly sort of way, rather than contextually, sociological sort of take on it. And then, you know, if we have time to talk about a little bit about what I would consider the sort of the three or four of the big models, that are not models, examples we might see, you know, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, you know, Narnia, Hunger Games, you know, some of these things are those apocalyptic, are they something else? Well, how do they feed into all of this? So I'll talk about that a little bit. So we'll overlap a lot of it.
a little bit, yeah. The article that I sent you from the Living Church last time begins with this kind of Narnia thing. My 10-year-old recently had a classic book lover's conundrum in his hands. He was halfway through the final Harry Potter book, and he had two strong desires that were pulling him in different directions. He really wanted to know what happened in the end and how the story was resolved, who would survive, who would triumph, who would end up together. On the other hand, he didn't want the story to be over. After spending hours reading in their adventures, he didn't want his time with his beloved characters, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, to end. His solution to his ambivalence was to read a few pages at a time and then abruptly stop. A little while later, he'd pick up the book again, read a few more pages, and then put it down again. Eventually, of course, he ran out of pages. He came to the end, which was both satisfying and bittersweet. The story was now over. The dual desire is a God-given longing within each of us. We need to know how the story concludes because its ending has significant influence in its overall shape and message. So, you know, there are these correlations, I think, to contemporary literature, whether it's dystopian novels or utopian novels.
So you're saying we're waiting for the sequel?
Exactly.
I looked her up, by the way, the author of the article. She went to Wheaton College and studied ancient languages. So for those of you who don't know, Wheaton's a big school in the evangelical world.
It is.
And you know, Bart Ehrman, some of you know Bart Ehrman's been doing at Wheaton as well. So and they get good grounding in that ancient language. But she did her MDiv at Duke. So
There you go. She has a doctorate from Duke?
no.
Oh, just seminary.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, because she is an Episcopal priest, but she probably is influenced by the evangelical perspective that she had in Wheaton. Well, we're probably, anything else? Anything? No questions, comments? We still have one more time. I have no more homework for you, except to read the book, of course. All right, thank you.
Next class is next Sunday.
Sorry?
So next Sunday?